I'm really looking forward to this fight. Late addition to our UFC card, headlined by Michelle Waterson and Angela Hill. And Matt, this is a fight that just popped out of thin air. It's on the UFC's website. Our pal John Hanko, JHK MMA, tweeted it out. Everybody kind of looked into it. And all of a sudden, Roque Martinez is over on the mainland, and he's going to be taking on Alexander Romanov. And Matt, a lot of people familiar with Alexander Romanov. He was supposed to take on Rafael Pessoa this spring. That fight didn't happen. Then he was supposed to take on Marcin Tybura. He caught the COVID. Then he was supposed to take on a really tough out in Marcus Rogerio de Lima. And Matt, that fight didn't happen last week. So Alexander Romanov hangs out in Vegas, sticks around. If you go over onto his Instagrams, who's he training with right now? A little bit of John Jones at the UFC PI. I like that. Alexander Romanov. And on the right-hand side, this is the man that we're going to focus on before we go into a flashback, because we have a perfectly good preview from last weekend about Alexander Romanov. But Roque Martinez representing Guam. And Matt, we've had a lot of fighters from Guam compete in the UFC. It's a shame that Frank Camacho out of his fight against Brock Weaver this week. I know these two in communication kind of about that one. But Roque Martinez getting the shot. I mean, listen. We've seen a fighter out of Guam very recently competing on incredibly short notice, picking up a huge underdog win in Trevin Jones over Timur Valiev just a couple of weeks ago. So Roque Martinez comes in here representing a good camp at a Spike 22. Listen, he represents a couple different gyms as well. Paradise Fitness and Custom Fitness. But I mean, with the COVID and with the pandemic, kind of tough to find, consistent training. But this is a guy that you recognize from Rizin. He's had fights against the Honey Bear, Jake Hune, Alaska's own. Split decision loss in that one. He also has a first-round loss to Mirko Krokop over in Rizin. He's a former Deep champ. He's also a former PXC champ. And this is a guy that a lot of people have had eyeballs on before his foray into the UFC. Listen, he's won his last two fights, and his last fight was a weird one. He took on Hideki Sekine Shrek. And if you've ever heard of Sekine, former police officer, the nickname is obviously Shrek, like I just said, and former pro wrestler. And if you look into his record, a knockout loss to Alan Engelani over in one championship. Nice. They love playing their version of Hector Lombard on the social medias at least twice a day. Also had a fight against Brandon Vera in 2016, Shrek. Now, Roque Martinez, all sorts of finishes. 34 years old, like you can see on the screen. So a bit of a late start into the UFC. I mean, we saw Parker Porter getting the chance at 35 here recently against Chris Daukaus. But for Martinez, 8 of his wins by knockout or TKO, 3 of them by submission, 4 by decision. That's pretty well the Cole's notes on Roque Martinez. By the way, he's a big Seattle Seahawks fan, so we can throw that one in there. I'm excited about this one, Matt. We've seen something out of Roque Martinez that it's a weird one, and it jumps off the page, and a lot of people have been asking for the Bellator predictions. We don't quite have the time right now. No. If you keep watching, maybe we go full time. Who knows? But there's a Bellator fighter that Roque Martinez really reminds you of.
He's another man who's quite heavy and throws flying knees. And it's Javi Ayala. And it's not that their styles are a direct contrast of each other. It's just that when you see a guy like Roque Martinez, he's similar to a Derek Lewis or a Javi Ayala, and that their body type really doesn't give their athleticism its due. Because when you watch him fight, he can throw flying knees. He can wrestle quite well. And he's a guy who, his stand-up is going to give Alexander Romanov quite a bit of problems. We saw that. He's got a really nice lead hook, really good boxing, and he's not afraid to switch it up no matter where the fight goes. The issue is, though, and we talked about it in Romanov's breakdown, they both have slightly padded records when you really go through and look. Romanov, definitely, but Martinez to the certain degree. So it should be a really interesting fight just because you don't really know what you're going to get from either guy.
All right, Matt, so let's flash it back to Alexander Romanov. We talked about him at length when he was supposed to take on Marcus Rogerio de Lima last week, so we'll throw it back to that. UFC newcomer Alexander Romanov, and a lot of people might not be familiar with Alexander Romanov. They might see his nickname King Kong. They might see the traps and the triceps and all the muscles and the girth. I mean, the guy in his last fight weighed in at 264.6. You have to think he's a fighter that cuts to make the heavyweight limit. Really big guy, really impressive finishes. All of his 11 wins by finish, 4 by knockout, 7 by submission. He's got an Ezekiel choke win on his record. He's got a slam knockout in his last fight. You can find a lot of tape on him from Eagles. He was a former Eagles heavyweight champ, before coming into the UFC. Really impressive record. Moldova, all of a sudden a hotbed in MMA. Iwan Kutelaba that we were supposed to have taken on Magomed Ankalaev again and again, and it just won't happen. But it's good to see Romanov
in the UFC and finally getting the opportunity. But again, I talked about the slam knockout. Well, let's kind of dig into that one a little bit because, again, it was February of 2019. He was taking on Sergio Freitas, who was 6-1. Somebody might look at that number and say, geez, that means something. That's a good step up in competition. But Freitas hadn't fought in 3 years. His opponents to that point didn't have Tapology pages. And listen, if you don't have a Tapology page, it means bad things. Like you're doing something wrong. And you're probably not doing something right. So there was all of that coming in there. He got suplexed. It was kind of like a side suplex. And when he landed, Romanov kind of got on top. He was trying to get the back. And Freitas just gave up. He just tapped. Like Romanov just had position and he tapped. So you look at that fight, Freitas at the time, like I said, he was 42 years old, 43 now. And then you look at the fight that Romanov had before that. He took on Sultan Murtazaliev, and he beat him in November of 2019. Murtazaliev, that was a 3rd in a 3-fight losing streak. He took on Sergey Pavlovich, then Vladimir Dainenko. And realistically, Murtazaliev hadn't won a fight since 2014. So I'm just poking holes and going through this. So then you look at a guy's record and what some people will do, and I'll do it every now and again, and I did it right here, is you pick a guy who, what are his wins and losses or who are they against? Because if it's against majority debuting fighters and you have a super padded record, you really have to scratch your head. So you look at Romanov and he's got a win over a guy that was 20-5 at the time in Alexander Stolyarov. And you think, hey, well, that was probably really good competition. Well, then I looked into Stolyarov's record. So out of 25 total fights, 11 for Stolyarov were against debuting fighters, and 10 of them were against guys with less than 4 pro fights. And the 2 big losses on his record were to Jeff Munson and Zimon Bajor, who both of those guys fought top competition. And if you wanted to see 2 guys get for free, Jeff Munson, you know where to find him.
Jeff Munson here. You like watching people get for free?
Don King MMA Promotions. But overall, again, Romanov, I look at this whole body of record. What can I tell you? He fights like a Sambo fighter would fight. He goes in there with his hands normally pretty low. He throws good tie kicks. He tries to get in close, take you down. He expends a ton of energy doing it, but normally he pops back up pretty well in the second round. Again, we've barely seen him out of the first. I think I had mentioned earlier, he's only fought to the third round twice, so it's not often that you see that.
And now bringing it back, I mean, I'm really excited about this fight because Alexander Romanov, the wrestling and sumo backgrounds, it's kind of wild that you have a heavyweight like that. He has that weird Muay Thai stance, but it's odd because he keeps his hands low, but he throws front kicks. He'll throw jump kicks. Very strange striking. I really like that John Jones connection this week. That's kind of crazy. I mean, you had Romanov kind of waiting in the wings. You got Martinez coming in on incredibly short notice. As an aside as well, if you listen to some of his interviews from this week, again, like this is in days' notice. So Guam, really behind their guy. He brought a buddy over from the island. He had a guy on the mainland from the Pacific Northwest. And I mean a buddy coming in to help out. Not a fighter, not a big trainer, but a motivator. Neat to see. And listen, you can't count Roque Martinez out. Again, Trevin Jones is the perfect example. And oh, by the way, they're from the same place in the world. So listen, dreams can come true and stuff can happen, but I mean, the odds are stacked against him. Right now, Romanov, a minus 325 favorite, open as a minus 400. There's only odds on Bovada right now. And if you look at Martinez, a plus 250, open as a plus 300. Over on Tapology at a 558 votes, 96% Romanov, 76% by knockout. Now, I have to say this because people give me a hard time. They'll say, well, you were really high on this guy or you weren't high on this guy leading into it. I'm all Romanov in this fight. I know I had picked Marcos Rogerio de Lima to beat him. Roque Martinez provides a whole different set of problems. Exactly. He's a totally different type of striker than de Lima was. I just like the power out of Romanov in terms of his takedowns. I think that it's going to be an interesting fight, but Romanov's one of those guys that, I wouldn't say the sky's the limit, but in this fight, he should be able to get one over Martinez.
No, I agree 100%. Romanov's a guy who, like you had said, he's a little one-trick pony-ish because, he's going to go for that takedown. But the issue is that one trick's really, really good. And to fight him on a full training camp is pretty difficult. So to come in on a week's notice while flying to mainland U.S., that'd be a very difficult task to do for Martinez. So, yeah, I'm picking Romanov.
And, Matt, listen, we're both going with Alexander Romanov. But, hey, I can't wait to see the future for Romanov, but also some more fights on some full camps for Roque Martinez. You're not going to want to miss the rest of our predictions, including the added fight between Jalen Turner and Brock Weaver and an extended look at our main event between Michelle Waterson and Angela Hill. So you keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. And as we always say, let's get into it.